The camera pulls back from a rain-soaked window in a dimly lit recording studio. Inside, a woman with honey blonde hair and crimson lips sits at a vintage microphone, her voice floating through the silence like smoke from a dying cigarette. This is Elizabeth Woolridge Grant, known to the world as Lana Del Rey, weaving melancholy into gold. But beneath the carefully constructed persona of Americana nostalgia and tragic beauty lies a story far more complex than her dreamy ballads suggest, a tale of reinvention, obsession, and the price of becoming your own creation. Born on June 21, 1985 in Manhattan, Elizabeth entered a world that seemed destined to shape her contradictory nature. Her father, Robert Grant, was a successful entrepreneur who built his fortune in the advertising world, while her mother, Patricia Ann Hill, brought artistic sensibilities from her teaching background. The family moved to Lake Placid, New York when Elizabeth was still a child, trading the urban energy of Manhattan for the haunting beauty of the Adirondack Mountains. Here, surrounded by vast lakes and endless forests, young Elizabeth would develop her deep connection to American landscapes that would later permeate her music. But this idyllic setting masked underlying tensions. Elizabeth's relationship with her parents, particularly her father, would become increasingly strained as she grew older. Her younger siblings, Caroline and Charlie, would later describe family dinners where Elizabeth seemed to exist in her own world, humming melodies that no one else could hear. Her uncle, a musician himself, noticed her unusual gift early on. She wasn't just singing, he recalled years later. She was channeling something ancient, something that didn't quite belong in our modern world. By her teenage years, Elizabeth's behavior had become increasingly erratic. She struggled with alcohol, a battle that would shadow her for decades to come. Her parents, desperate to help their troubled daughter, sent her to Kent School, a prestigious boarding school in Connecticut. It was here that she first picked up a guitar, teaching herself to play in the solitude of her dormitory room. Fellow students remembered her as distant but magnetic, someone who seemed to carry secrets too heavy for her young shoulders. She would sit by the lake for hours, remembered her roommate Sarah Chen, just strumming her guitar and singing these incredibly sad songs. We all knew she was special, but there was something almost frightening about how deeply she felt everything. After high school, Elizabeth enrolled at Fordham University in the Bronx to study philosophy, a choice that surprised no one who knew her introspective nature. But academia couldn't contain her artistic ambitions. She began performing at open mic nights in Manhattan's Lower East Side, her haunting voice cutting through the noise of crowded clubs. These early performances were raw and unpolished, but they possessed an authenticity that would later become both her greatest asset and most carefully guarded secret. Her first taste of the music industry came through her father's connections, a fact that would later fuel critics' claims that she was merely a manufactured product. Robert Grant used his business relationships to help his daughter secure meetings with record labels, leading to her first recording contract with 5 Points Records in 2007. Under her birth name, Lizzie Grant, she released an album called Lana Del Rey, aka Lizzie Grant, to virtually no fanfare. The album's failure devastated her, but it also marked the beginning of her most crucial transformation. "I knew I had to become someone else," she would later confide to a close friend. Elizabeth Grant wasn't strong enough to survive in this world. I needed to create someone who could. The metamorphosis into Lana Del Rey began in earnest around 2008. She chose the name carefully, Lana after actress Lana Turner, Del Rey from the affluent California beach town. This wasn't just a stage name, it was a complete reinvention of self. She began crafting a persona that blended old Hollywood glamour with trailer park tragedy, creating a mythology that was part truth, part fiction, and wholly captivating. Her breakthrough came in 2011 with a homemade music video for video games. Shot with a handheld camera and featuring found footage of skateboarders and classic films, the video went viral almost overnight. The song's dreamy production and Lana's sultry vocals created something entirely new, a sound that critics would later describe as sadcore or Hollywood sadness. Music journalist Rob Sheffield wrote at the time, Lana Del Rey doesn't just sing songs, she creates entire worlds you want to disappear into, even if they're worlds you might never escape. But success brought scrutiny, and scrutiny brought controversy. When Lana appeared on Saturday Night Live in January 2012, her nervous, breathy performance divided audiences. Critics called her a fake, a manufactured pop star hiding behind vintage filters and borrowed nostalgia. The backlash was swift and brutal. Television host David Letterman publicly mocked her performance, while music magazines questioned her authenticity. "They wanted to destroy me before I even had a chance to prove myself," Lana later reflected during a candid interview. "But I realized that controversy was just another form of attention, and attention was what I needed to survive." Her debut album, Born to Die, proved the critics wrong, debuting at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and eventually going multi-platinum. The album's success was built on Lana's ability to make sadness sound beautiful, to transform personal pain into universal poetry. Songs like Summertime Sadness and Blue Jeans became anthems for a generation that felt disconnected from the optimistic pop music dominating the charts. As her career flourished, so did her romantic entanglements. Her relationship with photographer Barry James O'Neill became tabloid fodder, with paparazzi following the couple through the streets of New York and Los Angeles. O'Neill, a Scottish musician and artist, seemed to embody the troubled artist archetype that Lana was drawn to. Their relationship was passionate but turbulent, marked by creative collaboration and personal conflict. "Barry understood her darkness," recalled mutual friend and artist Francesco Carrozzini. "But understanding something and being able to heal it are two different things. They fed off each other's sadness in ways that weren't always healthy." The relationship ended in 2014, but not before it had influenced some of Lana's most emotionally raw material. Songs from her album Ultraviolence dealt explicitly with themes of domestic turbulence and emotional manipulation, leading some critics to accuse her of romanticizing abusive relationships. The controversy surrounding the album's title track and its references to violence sparked debates about feminism and artistic responsibility that followed Lana for years. Her subsequent relationship with musician G-Eazy brought different challenges. Their public appearances were carefully orchestrated events, each photograph and interview designed to maintain their respective images. But friends close to the couple described a relationship that felt more like a business arrangement than a romance. "She was lonely," admitted her longtime friend and collaborator Jack Antonoff. Success had given her everything she thought she wanted, but it had also isolated her from genuine human connection. Every relationship became part of the performance. At the height of her fame, Lana's public persona as the melancholy princess of pop culture began to clash with her private struggles. Those closest to her described someone increasingly paranoid about media attention and obsessed with controlling her image. She would spend hours crafting Instagram posts, deleting and reposting photos until they captured exactly the right mood. Her creative process became equally meticulous and tormented. Producer Dan Auerbach, who worked with her on Ultraviolence, described recording sessions that could last for days. "She would sing the same line 50 different ways, searching for something that I'm not sure she could even articulate. There was a perfectionism there that bordered on self-destruction." Her perfectionism extended beyond music into every aspect of her public life. She became known for showing up hours late to interviews and photo shoots, not out of arrogance but from crippling anxiety about how she would be perceived. Journalists described meeting someone who seemed to be performing even in casual conversation, as if Elizabeth Grant had become so deeply buried beneath Lana Del Rey that she could no longer surface. The weight of maintaining her carefully constructed image began to show in 2017 and 2018. Her album, Lust for Life, featured collaborations with artists like The Weeknd and A$AP Rocky, but critics noted a certain hollowness to the material, as if she were going through the motions of being Lana Del Rey rather than inhabiting the character naturally. Behind the scenes, those who worked with her described someone struggling with depression and anxiety. Her longtime manager described finding her in her West Hollywood home at 3 in the morning, sitting at her piano and playing the same melancholy chord progression over and over again. She told me once that she felt like she was drowning in her own creation, the manager recalled. Lana Del Rey had become this living thing that demanded to be fed, and Elizabeth was exhausted from feeding it. Her struggles with alcohol, which had begun in her teenage years, intensified under the pressure of fame. Friends described watching her drink wine for breakfast and whiskey for dinner, always maintaining the elegant composure that her image required, but slowly destroying herself from within. The COVID-19 pandemic brought an unexpected respite. Locked away from the world, Lana began to reconnect with the simpler pleasures that had inspired her early music. She spent months at her family's lake house in upstate New York, the same landscapes that had shaped her as a child. During this time, she began work on what would become some of her most critically acclaimed material. Her 2021 albums, Chemtrails Over the Country Club and Blue Banisters, marked a return to the introspective songwriting that had made her famous, but with a new maturity and self-awareness. The songs dealt honestly with her struggles with fame, relationships, and mental health, without the glossy production that had sometimes obscured her earlier work's emotional impact. "I realized I didn't have to be a character anymore," she said in one of her rare, honest interviews. "I could just be a person who makes music about being a person. That was scarier than any persona I'd ever created." But even as she began to find peace with her artistry, new controversies emerged. Her comments about other female pop stars drew criticism from fans and fellow artists alike. Her romantic relationship with police officer Sean Larkin raised questions about her political beliefs and social consciousness. Each controversy seemed to pull her further away from the public eye she had once craved. By 2022, Lana had largely retreated from public life. Her social media presence became sporadic, her interviews even rarer. Those who glimpsed her during this period described someone who seemed tired, not just physically, but spiritually exhausted by the demands of being a public figure. Her final public appearance was at a small venue in Los Angeles in early 2023, performing acoustic versions of her early songs for a crowd of fewer than 100 people. Audience members described a performance that felt like a farewell, though no one could have predicted how prophetic that impression would prove to be. On a foggy morning in March 2023, Lana Del Rey was found in her Venice Beach home, having died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 37. The official cause was listed as complications from a blood clot, but those who knew her understood that she had been dying slowly for years, worn down by the impossible task of being both Elizabeth Grant and Lana Del Rey simultaneously. The news of her death sent shockwaves through the music world and beyond. Tributes poured in from fellow artists, critics who had once dismissed her work, and millions of fans who had found solace in her melancholy anthems. Taylor Swift wrote on social media, "She taught us that sadness could be beautiful, that vulnerability was a kind of strength. The world is quieter without her voice in it." Her funeral was held at a small church in Lake Placid, near the waters where young Elizabeth Grant had first discovered her love of music. The service was private, attended only by family and close friends, but thousands of fans gathered outside, creating an impromptu memorial of flowers, handwritten lyrics, and vintage photographs. Her father, Robert Grant, delivered a eulogy that revealed the man behind the myth. "My daughter spent her life trying to become someone worthy of love," he said, his voice breaking. "She never understood that she was already worthy, just as she was." In death, Lana Del Rey achieved something that had eluded her in life: universal critical recognition. Music historians began to reassess her contributions to popular culture, recognizing her as a pivotal figure who had bridged the gap between indie authenticity and mainstream appeal. Her influence could be heard in the work of countless younger artists who had grown up listening to her albums. The mythology surrounding her death only added to her legend. Conspiracy theories emerged about hidden messages in her final songs, secret relationships that had driven her to despair, and unfinished albums that contained her most profound artistic statements. But perhaps the truth was simpler and more tragic. She was an artist who had given everything to her art, leaving nothing for herself. Her estate released a final album in late 2023, compiled from demos and unreleased tracks she had recorded during her final years. The album, titled The Grants, featured songs performed under her birth name for the first time since her early career. Critics noted a stripped-down honesty to the material that suggested she had finally found peace with the person she had always been beneath the carefully constructed persona. Today, nearly 2 years after her passing, Lana Del Rey's influence continues to grow. Her music soundtracks countless films and television shows, her aesthetic inspires fashion designers and photographers, and her approach to authenticity and performance continues to influence how artists navigate fame in the social media age. But perhaps her greatest legacy lies in the permission she gave others to embrace their sadness, to find beauty in melancholy, and to understand that vulnerability and strength are not opposing forces, but complementary ones. She showed a generation of listeners that it was okay to feel deeply in a world that often demanded surface-level emotions. As the sun sets over the Pacific Ocean, painting the Venice beach sky in shades of pink and gold that Lana Del Rey would have found achingly beautiful, her voice still echoes in the collective memory of popular culture. She remains what she always was, a dreamer who turned her dreams into songs, a woman who transformed her pain into poetry, and an artist who proved that sometimes the most authentic thing you can do is create a completely artificial version of yourself. In the end, Elizabeth Woolridge Grant became immortal by becoming Lana Del Rey, and Lana Del Rey achieved eternal life by returning, finally, to Elizabeth. The circle was complete, the performance was over, but the songs, those haunting, beautiful, impossible songs, would continue to play long after the last note had faded into silence.